Thank you, Mason, for reading that for me this morning. Good to see everybody. We are going to be continuing our thought this morning that we started last week. And so if you would, go ahead and turn your Bibles to 1 Corinthians chapter 13. And if you will remember, last week we studied in the same spot, but I'm going to go ahead and read verses 4 through 8 again for you this morning. It says charity, and of course charity here in the King James Version, love can be put in the place of charity. Charity suffereth long and is kind. Charity envieth not. Charity vaunteth not itself, is not puffed up, doth not behave itself unseemingly, seeketh not her own, is not easily provoked, thinketh no evil, rejoiceth not in iniquity, but rejoiceth in the truth. And here I think he's summing it up here. It beareth all things, it believeth all things, hopeth all things, endureth all things. Charity never faileth, but whether there be prophecies, they shall fail. Whether there be tongues, they shall cease. Whether there be knowledge, it shall vanish away. And to complete that thought, I guess you might say, love never does go away. The kind of love that is being talked about here. Keep your Bibles marked that there. Last week, we learned from Paul's writing there about the fact that he was talking about all things. Now let's set the stage here again a little bit of what's going on, maybe even a little bit deeper than what we did last week. Paul is telling the church here at Corinth of a more excellent way. More excellent way of what? He's telling the church of a more excellent way to live. And by doing that, that is by putting love in the proper place and having the proper kind or the proper manner of love. Now, the church there was having several different problems, as we all know quite a bit about the church at Corinth, and it was having problems with divisions in certain things. Let's look at 1 Corinthians chapter 1, and let's look at verse 10. 1 Corinthians chapter 1, and I'm going to read verse 10. And it says, "Now I beseech you, brethren, by the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, that you all speak the same thing, and that there be no divisions among you, but that you be perfectly joined together in the same mind and in the same judgment." Those are two things that we want to keep in mind as we go throughout here. The same mind and the same judgment is what Paul is wanting these people to improve on. This is a place that they need some improvement. Now, Paul rebukes them, if we go just a little bit further, if we move over to chapter 3 and verse 3, look what it says there. It says, "For you are yet carnal, for whereas there is among you envying, strife, and divisions, are you not carnal and walk as men?" We certainly wouldn't want to get that letter from Paul, would we? Telling us that we are yet carnal. In other words, by the way that he states that, you should not be by this time. You should be past these things. But Paul tells them, still yet, you are carnal. So, in chapters 12 through 14, if we did a deeper dive in what was going on here, we see that the division that Paul brings out that they are having, at least one of them, is their attitude towards spiritual gifts. Now, we understand that spiritual gifts were a thing that was going on at this time, and they had some divisions over these things, of who had spiritual gifts, who didn't, who had what kind, and who didn't, and so forth like that. Now, in the light of their actions, through their, not just their attitudes, but we would say their bad attitudes toward these things, Paul tells them of a more excellent way. A more excellent way to be. He tells them of a proper form of love for each other. Now, you might would think that when they were having trouble with something as, some might would say serious, as these spiritual gifts. However, I think Paul would say trivial, because these are things that were going to vanish away, and they were having problems with them. But however you would classify them at that particular time, these spiritual gifts, he turns to love. That their love for each other is the problem, and what's causing them to have a problem with this conflict of what's going on with these spiritual gifts. You see, he tells them of a proper form of love. What kind of love they need. And as we go throughout these studies, it is a love that seeks the welfare that is best for who? A love that seeks the welfare that is best for who? Well, me, of course. No, for others. We as individuals are supposed to have a type of love who keeps the welfare of others in the front of our mind. Now, folks, that's not easy. We would say, oh yes, that's the Christian attitude. We would never not do that. Well, we better back up and look at our actions, because they may not look like what our intent is. So we're going to go on with this study, because this is a love that is not just, hey, we're born with this, right? This is the kind of love we understand because it's ingrained in us. If you read all the chapters here up to chapter 13, you're going to see that's not what you are born with. This love, as we see in Paul's writing, must be learned. It must be learned. It is a love that has to have identifying qualities. What do I mean by that, identifying qualities? People can see it in you. People can see this type love in you. You can actually feel this type love in you when you make decisions and throughout your actions. It is a love that the qualities must be acquired. As I said, it's not a love that, hey, this is a natural thing. This is the human reaction that would come out. No, it is a type of love that must be acquired. And it is a type of love that not only do you learn about, and this is what you're supposed to have, it's a type of love that you have to practice, because it doesn't come naturally. And when something doesn't come naturally, you have to practice it. It's just like when you see somebody who has, we'll say, they were born with this gift of playing the guitar or whatever the case may be. They do it so well. And then you see somebody that kind of plucks on a thing and they don't get their fingers on it right. And you say, they can play the guitar. Yeah, that's it. It's not that great. So we can understand that this love has to be put to practice, because it's not easy. We're not born with it. So that is the kind of love that Paul is talking about. Now, having said that, about the importance of having this kind of love, what does that mean? It means it must be taught, right? And that's what we're doing here this morning. We are teaching what this kind of love is. So it is very important, because we don't want to be like these Corinthians here that are having so much trouble with all the things. And if you'll remember, it said 4 times there, it was repeated, in all things. So it is important. It helps us when we have this love in all things. It is in this context that Paul sums this love up in the 4 ways. And this morning we're going to look at the second one. Love believeth all things. Now let that sink in and see what that means to you. Love believeth all things. It's not easy to get your mind wrapped around that just right off. At least it wasn't for me. Now I want us to recall that we are talking about here not only the people that we are associated with here, our Christian brothers and sisters, but our blood brothers and sisters, which sometimes overlap, a lot of times overlap, and family that we are with. Remember, the motivation for this lessons was that we are in a get-together type of year, if you will. With Thanksgiving, Christmas, families get together, and some people have joyful times, and some people don't, and some people don't even get together. And that's why we are wanting to talk about this kind of love that Paul is instructing us to have. So let's say it again. Love believeth all things. Now that's the kind of love I'm supposed to have toward you, that I believeth all things. So if we are going to talk about it, and we're going to discuss, well, what does this mean? Let's start out by talking about what it don't mean, okay? Because there's obviously some things that it don't mean. This does not mean, Paul is not telling us that, he's not even telling the people then, and he's not telling us now, that our love must have a foolish type discrimination in regard to things that he believes. I probably didn't say that real clear. Paul is not saying that you are just to believe everything that somebody tells you, or that we must never make any inquiries as to what is true or false. He's not saying that, is he? He's not saying that. And he is not saying that we shouldn't look for the right and the wrong in things. And he is not telling us to be simple-minded man. Now, over in Proverbs 14 and verse 15, it tells what a simple-minded man is. Now, listen to what it says. It says, a simple-minded man believeth every word, but the prudent man looketh well to his going. Does that contradict with what Paul says here, that we are to believe everything? You would say, yeah, that don't make sense. He's talking out of both sides of his mouth. It is not talking out of both sides of his mouth, and we're going to go into that a little further. You see, we want to be prudent, and we also want to have the good judgment that is talked about there, right? You see, back in 1 Corinthians there that we looked into chapter 1, it talked about having good judgment. In other words, if you knew what the rest of the chapter was going to talk about, and you knew it was going to be that love that he was talking about, you could surmise that that love that he's going to talk about tells us, it also gives us good judgment. And it does, for several different reasons. If we don't practice prudence and good judgment, we can be convinced that black is white and white is black. Does that sound like the world today? It's almost like a good speaker, a good salesman can convince people of anything. How does the Bible put it? That wrong becomes right and right becomes wrong, black becomes white, white becomes black. Yes, that's not what Paul is teaching here when he tells us the right kind of love believes in the other person. Now, Paul sums that up in other words by saying, believeth all things, as we study, does not include gullibility. And I hope that's a word. Gullibility. In other words, it's not saying be gullible, Scott. You go out here and you talk to your friends and your family and your brothers and sisters in Christ, and you're to be gullible. No, he's telling us to be educated. Let's look at what he's actually saying. So what does it mean? Love believeth all things. First now, again, I want to remind everybody here that Paul is taking a spiritual matter, this problem that they were having with spiritual gifts, and he is taking the matter of love that people are demonstrating as individuals, and he's teaching a way to love in all ways, and that will affect all things, and that this is an excellent form of love. How many things can you do and do excellent? I can't do any and do excellent. Paul says if you can master this kind of love, it is an excellent type of love. A more excellent way of living. Now, if you take this word believe here that is used in this particular case, the Bible definition of this word believe is to think to be true. Think to be true. To be persuaded of. To credit or to place confidence in. Now, I want to read this definition one more time because it's important for you to pick up on this, because this lesson does require us to think just a little bit deeper. To think to be true, to be persuaded of, to credit or to place confidence in. That's what this word believe is talking about. Now, as we have disagreements, and we all have disagreements, right? We disagree with each other. We disagree about certain subjects. We disagree about ways of doing things. We disagree about an action that's required maybe to solve a problem. We disagree even about an answer to a problem. In other words, sometimes we can't agree on nothing. And Paul understands that. He certainly understands that. You think Paul never had problems with people that was around him? Absolutely he did. But Paul is receiving information from a higher place that is telling him the excellent way that love can handle these things. Now, love believes this. Paul is instructing us to believe in the person that we are talking to. Love believes that their motives are genuine. Think about that. Paul is saying the person that you may be having a conflict with, their motives are genuine. He's not necessarily saying that they are genuine. He's saying you are to believe they are genuine and that they are sincere. If we differ in an idea or ways, even if we know that person is wrong and you are right, and we always know when we're right, correct? Oh yeah, but I'm facing this hard-headed person here. What's Paul saying? You got to understand they believe they are right too, you see. Now, if you will remember last week when we started this lesson, we kind of triggered it off the fact that some people weren't getting together for Thanksgiving over the outcome of the election, right? And we pointed out how trivial that was and hoped that none of us here were facing those kind of problems. So yeah, we have differences of opinions, different ways of doing things. We have actions that are required that we think this action is required, and this person over here thinks that action is required. But love believes the other people's motives are genuine and sincere. And if we can start there, that takes us a long ways. Now, this is important because I was just kidding when I said we're always right. I'm not always right. I'm going to argue with you until I'm hollering that I'm right. But folks, none of us are always right. You see, we could be wrong. We could definitely be wrong. Now, you all know that a large part of what I teach on a lot of times involves the Andy Griffith Show. Okay, that's where I got my education growing up. And I'm sorry I bothered with you that a lot. A lot of times I put in the Andy Griffith Show because I like to inject a little bit of humor. This is actually a little bit of seriousness that we can learn from the Andy Griffith Show. I don't know how many of you remember the episode that involved Mr. McBeavy. Okay, a few of you good enough on the Andy Griffith Show to remember Mr. McBeavy. Well, if you will remember that, and if you will pay attention to this, it hits this lesson. If it was a nail, it hits it on the head. So listen to what happened. Opie was very small, very young. Now we're going to bring that. Some of us never grow up, right? In certain areas, we never grow up. We're the Opies out here. Okay, well, Opie was very small, and he was learning how to make believe. He even that morning as the episode starts out, and by the way, there's only like 164 episodes, so one of these days I'll have explained all of them to you. But Opie was very small, and he was learning make-believe, and that morning he was pretending he had a horse in the backyard. Remember that? He was really learning how to make believe, and his dad was encouraging him that. Learning how to make believe is a good thing. It makes your imagination grow. So he was pretending that. Well, then he came home later that day, and he talks about he met somebody out in the woods. He met somebody while he was out playing. Now, I guess it's a different time. I mean, I don't believe Aaron, when he was small enough that he was still trying to learn how to use his imagination, was out playing in the woods, but that's what he was doing. He was out in the woods, and he comes home and he tells his dad, I met somebody out there today, and he had some qualities, and he's playing, he's pretending. He said, I met a guy that was walking in the trees. And this guy was walking in the trees, and he could make smoke come out his ears. Not only could he make smoke come out in his ears, he had multiple hands. He had more than two hands. He had several hands, and he jingled when he walked. Sounds like he made that up, don't he? So his dad was like, oh, okay, what was his name? His name was Mr. McBeavy. Okay, he kind of goes along with it. You're doing good on this imagination thing. But then, as it comes along, Opie doesn't drop the matter. For one thing, he's got a quarter that this imagination friend gave him. Then he comes home with a hatchet that this imagination friend gave him. Opie's swearing to it. Well, his dad is like, Opie, imagination is a good thing. That's a great thing. But you got to draw a line somewhere and realize that you can't say something that's imaginary is completely real. You got to understand the difference, son. Well, Opie stuck to it. Now, here's what happened. It got to the point that Andy was going to have to give Opie some discipline. And his form of discipline was he was going to spank Opie. So he told Opie, if you don't admit that this is make-believe, I'm going to spank you. Well, Opie got tears in his eyes, and he said, you also taught me not to lie. And I'm telling you, this is real. Now, what do you think Andy did? He came back down the stairs. No spanking was administered. And, of course, here stood Barney at the bottom of the stairs, and Barney said, well, did you spank him? And Andy said, no, I didn't spank him. And Barney looked at Andy, and he said, you mean you believe his story? And he said, no, I don't believe his story, but I believe in Opie. And I believe Opie believes it. Now, folks, that's a good lesson for us. When we are having a conflict with somebody, what they believe is what they believe. We may believe something different, but if we have confidence in that person, we're going to give them some room. We're going to believe it too. Because they believe it. Because I believe in Opie. That is very powerful. You see, Andy gave room. Andy gave room to Opie to see things his own way. His own way. Even if, to Andy, Opie was wrong. Now, if Opie was wrong, has God ever given you the opportunity to do something wrong so you can learn from it? He has, hasn't he? That may be exactly what was happening to Opie if Opie was wrong. God was giving him the opportunity to learn from his mistakes. Have you ever been patient? Have you ever been patient in a time that maybe you would rush in, take over a situation, bark out the orders, and you just had patience and let them work themselves out? It's kind of amazing to watch it happen, isn't it? Oh, yeah, we can rush in, because I'm going to tell you, I'm that rush in person. I'm that rush in person and take over, instead of just simply asking, how can I help? And then going ahead and help. And then maybe later on, after more education is come about, and I'm not talking about the education of the person that you're having a problem with. I'm talking about your own education. After you learn a little more about the situation, you may see, oh, okay, now I know how to help. I know how to help. Now, here's the twist of the story of Andy and Opie. You see, this Mr. McBeavy was real. This Mr. McBeavy was an electrician who was putting line from telephone pole to telephone pole across the little woods that was there close to the house. Opie didn't realize it. But the man had come down from the climbing the poles right through the trees, and he had come down and he had showed Opie a trick where he could blow smoke out of his ears from smoking his cigar. So yes, he could blow smoke out of his ears. He wore a tool belt that had all kinds of tools around it. Opie asked him, "What is all this?" He said, "That's my extra hands. You see, I've got these extra hands that help me do my job." And you know what else? He jingled when he walked. So Opie wasn't making it up. As it turns out, that's exactly what Opie saw. And Andy gave him room to learn because Andy believed in Opie. And that's how we have to be by our family and our friends and even our acquaintances, Paul tells us. Be the same way about them, you see. Well, Opie was right. And a lot of times we will find that is the same situation. We must place that kind of confidence in other beliefs in all things. Thank you, Paul. In all things we are supposed to do that. We are to think them to be true. Because they may be. They may be, and they may be particularly for them. You see, what was true for Andy wasn't true for Opie. There was a difference there. But they were both true. You know, and we have to think of the people that we're having a conflict with, that they are acting in love as well. You see, they have love for us. So we return that. Motives are genuine on their side too. Their motives are genuine. Proper love will continue to demonstrate these actions unless there is an abundance of evidence. And that's where that gullible comes in. No, Paul's not telling us to be gullible. He's telling us to be patient in love and to apply these things. You see, especially when we're dealing with other Christians. And we talked about, that sometimes a lot of us here, when we're looking across our Thanksgiving table at somebody that maybe we're having a conflict with, they're a brother and sister in Christ too. Now, that's important because God guides the steps. What did Mason read this morning? He sets your steps. And He is in charge of your life. And something in the future may be learned out of exactly what you're going through now. And love will continue to demonstrate. The proper kind of love will continue to demonstrate these things. If you're having a great holiday with family and friends, I dare say it's because you are doing these kind of things. That throughout your education and your life as a Christian, these things have sunk in. Because we learn these throughout the rest of the Bible. The very last verse that we read here in Corinthians, Paul said, "I'm not sure why you're not doing these things, because they're easy." He didn't say that, did he? He didn't say, "I'm not sure why you're doing these things because they're easy." No, they're not easy. They're not easy to do. They are very difficult to do. But I want you to listen to this, okay? This last part. If we're having get-togethers with people, how many times does a conflict come up between you and another person, and I'm going to teach this person? That's always what it is, isn't it? They're doing something that you don't see it that way, so you know what? It's my opportunity to teach you. Any argument, a person is trying to teach the other one what they believe. Well, here's what happens. If we continue to try to teach in the way that we do, we tend to fill each other with suspicion. We fill each other with doubts. Things like contention and jealousy come out. That's what it can turn into. I know. I have seen it firsthand. I know what I'm talking about. You see, the proper kind of love is willing to think the best and the kindest of all men and all circumstances, as long as it is possible to do so. Long as it is possible to do so, we think those things. Love is the complete opposite of being a cynic, of being a pessimist, These are the qualities that completely undermine the character and motives of others. Because we're being a pessimist. Now, as I said, so many times we look at our argument situations as an opportunity to teach the other person. Well, the Bible talks about that too. When we are trying to have a relationship with family, friends, and acquaintances, we say, I was only trying to teach them. I was only trying to teach them. Well, the whole time in our efforts to teach them, we're puffed up. We're puffed up. We know everything. They know nothing. We're doting about why, and we're fussing about ways. We're arguing about what was said by who. So we're arguing over words. Why did I use those words? Why did I use words like puffed up, knowing nothing, doting about why, and fussing over different ways of doing things, arguing about who said what, over words? Why did I use those words? Turn with me to 1 Timothy. 1 Timothy, and we're going to look at chapter 6. And I'm going to read verse 4. What's being talked about here? He's talking about a false teacher. A false teacher. Look what he says. He is proud, knowing nothing, but doting about questions and strifes of words, whereof cometh envy, strife, railings, and evil surmising, perverse disputings of men of corrupt minds, and destitute of the truth, supposing that gain is godliness, from such withdraw yourself. It's kind of eye-opening. Yes, I know what this verse is talking about. It's talking about false teachers out here who are teaching things contrary to the gospel of God. But we can apply the same thing. If we're out here trying to teach and we're using these same motives, this puffed up, this knowing nothing, doting about who said what, actually we're the one that's supposed to be withdrawn from because we're teaching falsely. No wonder they ain't learning anything. No wonder they're not learning. We're not teaching them what they need to know. We're a false teacher in the world around about us. And he says here, don't be around those people. So all of a sudden, we're the ones that's right, and we're the ones that's supposed to be shunned a little. It's a very scary thing not to practice the things that Paul is teaching us here of how we love. You see, the things that we just talked about, these are the weaknesses that the false teacher strives to do to stir up strife. When actually we're not meaning to do that, but we're stirring up strife. We can do this unintentionally, but we won't do that if we learn this more excellent way to live. Things will come out better. That's the lesson that I had prepared for you this morning. These things that Paul mentions here are very important. They are very important. Anytime that somebody says, who has the power to say this, this is an excellent way to do it. And when it's a subject as big as love, we better pay attention. If there's anything that we can do for you this morning to help you in your current situation, let us know. We're here to help you. We don't want you putting off getting your life right. If there's anything that we can do for you at all, let us know as we stand and as we sing.